In Ireland, a court of law cannot compel a Roman Catholic priest to reveal what is told to him in the confessional, not even to protect a life, not even to protect several million lives. Yet a court of law can, and frequently does, compel a counsellor or therapist who has been working with a victim of sexual violence to surrender their counselling notes. This needs to change. Today, February 4th, 2026, Irish politicians will have the opportunity to vote for precisely such a change, and it is really important that they do. Currently, the defence's legal team can request the victim's counselling notes. The victim doesn't have to agree, but if petitioned, a judge can rule that they must comply. And this applies in both criminal and civil cases. And you gotta ask yourself, why do officers of the court have such a fucking hard on for delving into the therapy notes of victims of sexual violence and only victims of sexual violence? Let's unpack this for a moment, shall we? Bearing in mind that the vast majority of victims are women and children, and the overwhelming majority of perpetrators are men, I think it's safe to say that what we're dealing with here is nothing more complex, complicated, or sophisticated than plain old misogyny. In a criminal trial, the victim has no right to her own legal representation. She is merely a witness for the state. The solicitor acting on behalf of the state has no interest in the victim or her experiences or the effects of those experiences. They are only interested in winning the case. In a civil trial, the victim does have her own legal team, but, and listen carefully, they do not work for her. They work for themselves. They do not give a flying fuck about the victim. They only care about getting paid, because justice and law, my friends, are not synonymous. Let me get a little bit personal here. Years ago, when seeking pretrial discovery, my brother's legal teams demanded copies of my therapy and counselling notes going back decades, even though there is no compunction on anyone to retain notes past 7 years. Now, Philip Clark, who was my solicitor, unfortunately, was so intimidated by the criminal defense lawyer representing one of my rapist brothers that he bullied my counsellor into releasing my notes. Poor Philip was out of his depth and only concerned about lining his own pocket. Before, during, and after the trial, my legal team proved time and time again that their priority was not me. They identified with my rapist brothers because they too are abusers. And one way to abuse me was to get my therapy notes and hand them over to the people who had raped me. You know, bullying, harassment, gaslighting, outright lying, these are all abusive acts that my own legal team engaged in against me, their client. Look, as I said earlier, they were not working for me, they were working for themselves. They were not acting in my best interests, they were acting in their own best interests. Their compassion was not for me, the rape victim, but for my brothers, the rapists, because they had more in common with them. Philip Clark even told me, and I quote, that he felt sorry for Cormac Talbot, my rapist brother, one of my rapist brothers. When Philip was harassing me to insist that my counsellor, who was actually only trying to protect me, hand over years' worth of counselling notes, one of the things he said to me was, "Look it, you've nothing to hide." And he was right, I suppose. I had nothing to hide. I hadn't told a lie about the abuse I'd suffered. But there is a big difference between having nothing to hide and being entitled to privacy and being entitled to protect your privacy. Because it's not just the legal people who read a victim's counselling notes. As part of discovery, these notes are handed over to the abusers, and there's nothing to stop them from sharing those notes with whomever they please, which is exactly what happened to me. Snippets of my therapy notes were reproduced on social media by my youngest brother, Ross Talbot. My therapy notes were twisted and misrepresented, and posts like, by her own admission, she's mental health difficulties, popped up here, there, and everywhere. Yes, I have complex post-traumatic stress syndrome because for most of my childhood, I was sexually assaulted and raped nearly every night of the week. Anyway, Irish courts are not safe places for victims of sexual violence. They're just not. They're adversarial. The officers of the court, the judges, the barristers, the lawyers, they don't understand the impact of sexual violence. And they're not all that concerned about learning about it either. Making the details of our attempts to heal from sexual violence freely available to the men who rape us, for them to share with whomever they please, does not make Irish courts any safer. Unless Catholic priests become therapists and therapy takes place in the confession. Actually, no, I don't think that will work. The only thing that will work is a change in the law. TDs, show up, vote for the changes, vote for the safety of victims.